So today on Audience Cut, we're talking about yet another movie that includes the word star. Our patrons like to vote for these types of movies, and it's no surprise. I mean, there's a lot of great movies that have the word star. We already talked about The Last Starfighter, and then there's obviously Star Wars. Star Trek has made the channel what it is.
Absolutely. There's Starship Troopers, Star Odyssey, Starman, Stardust. I mean, there's just so many.
And Stargate.
What?
Stargate.
Stargate the movie? Oh no, I'm talking about great movies.
Stargate, directed by Roland Emmerich and starring Kurt Russell and James Spader.
Yes, and the DOP is Carl Walter Lindenlaub. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Who is the DOP of the commercially appraised film Prom's the Boy 2. And this film, as you said, was directed by Roland Emmerich, who is known as the disaster filmmaker. And they say that because, most of his films are actually not really good.
Oh, I thought you were going to say disasters. Yeah, well, this film was in 1994. It was definitely before he kind of rose to prominence. And actually, right after this, the next film he made was Independence Day, and then Patriot Day, and then I would say around, what do you think it started? Probably 2012 was the first disaster movie that they made. Oh, he did make, I think, The Day After Tomorrow.
Yeah, he did, yeah.
Okay, so that was kind of the start.
That was early 2000s, yeah.
Yeah, and then 2012, Moonfall most recently, which I did not see. I thought the direction of this movie was fine for what it was. Nothing about it necessarily was like noteworthy or anything, but good practical stuff, nice locations that were shot on, good sets. It's not a disaster movie, so.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is my own personal theory. I'm sure others can comment on it. I feel like every great filmmaker has like a solid era of years, and then like after a certain point, like I don't know if it's their ego or I don't know if it's just like no one telling them no. Like I'm not for like studio involvement, but I feel like everyone needs to have people to keep them in check. And when you get to that point of being successful, like no one's gonna tell you no. You know what I'm saying? I feel like, I don't know, maybe George Lucas might be the best example. I guess the direction I can appreciate was how quick they just got through the gate. I think it was like 10 minutes before they walked through the portal.
Yeah, we watched the theatrical version, which was just about 2 hours. It was like 1:55 when the credits hit. And for a 2-hour movie, the pacing, I think, is a strength of the movie. It drags a little more in the second half than the first. But yeah, getting into the action, we basically meet James Spader's character as this professor down on his luck. Then we meet Kurt Russell as this grieving father, ex-military, whose son has passed away from a gun accident, gets recruited back into the same job as James Spader does, and they both end up going through this discovered Stargate, and that's the plot. It like gets you right into it. Here's your two characters and go. And of course, their supporting cast too. None of the supporting cast really stuck out to me, although I do like French Stewart just as an actor.
French Stewart, man, classic.
You see, if you don't turn it on from here, we're screwed, okay? So I'm telling you guys, we're not going anywhere.
The film's first half, I think, is so strong because it leans on basically figuring out what the hell's going on. And something we talk about a lot, we are not ahead of the characters.
We see a young James Spader, which I feel like I never see, which seeing that was awesome. I thought he just, manifested into existence when he showed up as Robert California in The Office. So seeing him as a young man was super neat. He plays basically the same character as Matthew Broderick in Godzilla. It's like, oh, I have this odd job and I wear a backwards cap and wear glasses. No one gets me, I study. We got to talk about that opening scene where he's just giving this lecture. People came to see his lecture.
Well, who do you think built the pyramids?
I don't have any idea who built them. I mean, that
Men from Atlantis?
Oh, just lame.
The typical boomer just.
Like, I'm imagining this seminar was advertised as like, who really built the pyramids? And then as soon as he says that, they're like, oh, I'm out of here. Yeah, that was pretty great.
Yeah, I love Kurt Russell's whole thing. It's very similar to the opening of Apocalypse Now. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but that's with Martin Sheen, where like it's almost like these like military people are kind of like lost, or like they don't know what to do unless like they're on duty. It's a little different because Kurt Russell lost his son, so obviously he's grieving. But like Apocalypse Now like opens with like Martin Sheen's character's like in his apartment, just like getting fucking drunk. It's like I don't know what to do, and then it gets assigned like an assignment. It's like okay, he's back in.
I thought it was interesting how a lot of this movie kind of was similar to other Roland Emmerich movies made after this. You brought up the Godzilla Connection, which is another Roland Emmerich film. I guess you could maybe even... You know what? He has always been a disaster movie director, because you could argue Godzilla is a disaster movie, a monster attacking, Independence Day, aliens attacking. So now that I'm thinking about it, yeah. But this movie's not, because it mostly doesn't take place on Earth. Once they go through that Stargate, we're all on this other planet. But anyway, the plot of the movie and a lot of the themes and everything relates to a lot of his future films. I mean, just start off with a military force going up against an alien force, Independence Day.
Mm-hmm.
James Spader's character is very similar to Matthew Broderick, like you said in Godzilla. Mm-hmm. So I wonder how much he's like recycled his ideas. I'm not going to go through the effort of watching all of his movies to figure that out.
I wouldn't put you through that.
But it's an interesting thought that I had watching this one.
Yeah. Not everyone is that creative per se, and I was looking through like his writer and DOP. He's one of those filmmakers that uses he has his crew of people. Mm-hmm. The writer Dean Devlin. Like I think he's been working with him pretty much his entire career. Like that's his guy. I mean, it's kind of cool. I guess it's similar to like Adam Sandler's crew of people. Or our boy, Mike Flanagan, he uses the same people.
Jeff Howard, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like, I can't discredit it from that.
You can say what you want about the quality of them, but they all make money, People love to go to the theater to see big explosions and everything like that, so...
Yeah.
He kind of is coming along in the age of the blockbuster, movies like Jurassic Park, Back to the Future in the 80s, so him coming up in this time, it doesn't really surprise me that he's more of like a Hollywood director, you know what I mean? Like he's not the M. Night Shyamalan or the Mike Flanagan, he's the bring this guy in to make a big blockbuster. There's nothing wrong with that.
It's a job.
Yeah.
It's a job,
Someone's got to do it. I'm the chosen one.
I am the chosen one. When we watched it, I knew literally I didn't know who directed it, I didn't know who was in it. So everything was a total surprise for me, which was awesome.
Yeah, and they one by one are all entering the gate, and then Kurt Russell goes in, and then James Spader, when he goes up, kind of puts his hands in first, and then his face slowly going in until it gets pulled through, and then, so that was all really neat. And then even once they go through the gate, it's not like it's immediately revealed to you. Like, they're just in this dark area. Once they leave, they're in the desert. It's a pyramid, just like the Pyramid of Giza in Egypt. And it's just like a slow drip of information through the first half of the film.
Yeah.
They meet this group of people that are native to this planet, and they have their own language. And James Spader, one of his strengths is that he has, he's like a translator, ancient languages, those types of things. So he is trying to learn how to speak their language. But for a lot of the movie, they don't know their language and can't communicate through words. And the movie decides to not give us subtitles for what the other species is saying. And I really liked that. And that's one of my problems with later in the movie that we'll get to, is that eventually changes. But the whole dynamic with our crew and then this new humanoid species they meet, I was really interested in that dynamic. I really liked it.
Bunny way.
Bunny way.
Bunny way.
What's that mean? I have no idea.
He eventually figures out the language, because, spoilers, we figure out that this species of humanoids is actually just people from Egypt that were taken by our big bad. And just like all languages over the years, they evolved. So he was able to figure it out that way. It's like, oh, this is just ancient Egyptian language. It's just been modified or just adapted throughout the years, because it's been 1,000 years since they've been there.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact time, but yeah, it's been a very long time, thousands of years, yeah. I understand why they can now understand it, and when they're on screen talking to them, I don't really mind subtitles, but then later on in the film, there starts to be scenes where it's just the characters from that other species talking to each other, and there's subtitles to tell us what they say, and I felt they kind of cheapened the experience, or kind of took me out of it, because it's like, oh, well, if the movie can give me subtitles now, why couldn't it give me subtitles earlier? I know the reason for the plot, but do you get what I'm saying? It's like, oh, don't give it to me now. I haven't understood what but they have to, because those characters are delivering information we need to know.
Yeah, they're delivering important information.
Let's talk about Kurt Russell for a minute.
Oh, yes, please.
The dude is just badass in every movie.
Your job here is to realign the Stargate. Can you do that or not?
I can't.
Regardless of quality, and I'll just say now, I think I like this movie more than you did, but even enjoying the movie, like, he stands out as just, like, the dude is a star in everything. He shows up in this movie, and he originally has his signature long hair in this depressive state, and then he cuts it into more of, like, a crew cut style for the army, like, a high crew cut, and he just looks like a tank. And I love, like, his wardrobe throughout the movie is great. His big black goggles when they're in the desert. Like, the dude looks like a video game character. Looks like Duke Nukem or something.
Yeah, I think we made the joke during the reaction. Like, he looks like that guy from Street Fighter with, like, the military flat top.
Yeah.
Yeah, Kurt Russell is one of those amazing actors that just has wonderfully lasted his entire career with, like, I don't know, no real lull period as far as I know. And he has, like, so many, like, legacy characters or, like, just wonderful characters, whether it's Snake Plissken, whether it's McCready from The Thing, whether it's even as a more recent Ego from Guardians of the Galaxy 2. His performance in The Hateful Eight is one of my favorite of all time. And I just love an actor that continues to not reinvent himself, but continue to prove, like, hey, I can do all of it. Like, a most recent example would be RDJ in Oppenheimer, where, like, oh, he played Iron Man for 10 years, and then it's like, oh, here's me as the most hateable character after being, like, one of the most beloved. It's like, I love when actors are good, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And when someone can genuinely, like, you put them in your movie, and regardless of the quality, you're at least going to have that,
Yes.
that bar, you know?
Yeah.
I think the part in the movie where it kind of turned for me into enjoying it less literally was exactly an hour in. Alien ship comes down onto the pyramid, and Kurt Russell and James Spader are already gone with this colony of people, but everyone else, French Stewart and all the other soldiers, are still back at this pyramid. The alien ship comes down. It's an awesome design. It, like, goes over the pyramid, so that's why the pyramid is shaped that way. I love when they, like, explain historical things like that.
Yeah.
And then the alien thing comes in and just destroys all of them, which was a cool, tense scene. And I really loved the mask with the glowing blue eyes. And then after that, it's just kind of like, that's it. Like, we've figured it out. I almost would have preferred if they had actually been not humanoid, like, if those helmets were their actual head and they were like these robotic alien creatures, you know?
Yeah, I think that was the biggest disappointment, is when they ended up taking them off, like, oh, they're helmets. Because I thought, like, the ancient hieroglyphics, like, they showed, like, these people with, like, these weird, like, masks on. And it's like, oh, that's the only way they could describe what these species were, because, you know, that's, you know, they can't draw, like, they weren't drawing, like, you know, detailed paintings. What they
Yeah.
it was just these hieroglyphics. And I'm like, oh, that's the species, and, like, they're robotic? It's like, oh, no, it's just a mask for humanoids. It's like,
And the fact that they were an alien, because we see it for one quick moment in the movie.
The one dude was.
Yeah.
The main dude.
Ra.
Yeah.
But then the species was dying, so they just took over humanoids. So now the villains are basically a possessed human, essentially, is what he is. And it's just, you know, it just kind of seemed like a downgrade to what it could have been. Like, it could have been this cool, badass alien movie. I don't like to get too caught up in wishing the movie is what it wasn't, but that's where it kind of took the turn for me once the mystery was gone, because then it kind of just turns into a generic action movie, but set on this other planet instead of Earth.
Yeah, I agree. And once everything was figured out, and, like, the fun part was, like, not knowing.
Yeah.
Like, why is this happening? And then once you, especially after the exposition scene, it's like, oh, okay.
It's so funny. It's like your typical movie that doesn't have time for the exposition. So Kurt Russell shows up and he's like, oh, you can understand their language now? And James Spader's like, yes, here's 3 minutes of exposition.
A traveler from distant stars. He couldn't prevent his own demise, looking for a way to cheat death. Within a human body, he had a chance for a new life.
That's it. Let's go to the third act.
Yeah, I don't know. Is that better than Ra explaining it himself, I guess?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, I mean, what are you going to do? You know what I mean?
It's a tough thing to do when you have a dense backstory that doesn't happen in your movie and you have to explain it. It's hard.
Yeah.
But you did it to yourself when you wrote the movie.
Yeah, it's, I don't know, a double-edged sword, because the fun not knowing what's happening in the beginning, eventually we got to be tipped off. But it's like, what's a good way to tip us off or let us know that isn't, like, super over expository? I feel like that's one of the toughest things in movies.
Yep.
to display and tell information to the audience that isn't, like them looking directly at the camera. Here's what's happening.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they would say show, not tell, right?
Yeah.
And this movie was doing a really good job of that up until that scene. Sometimes you have no choice. If you want to include that much information of backstory in your movie, there has to be an expositional scene. It is what it is. I just thought it was kind of funny.
I don't know, man. Movies are hard, but
Well, that's why we're here to tear them apart.
exactly.
And inhabiting this human form, he appointed himself ruler.
They do eventually discover that there was a bomb sent with Kurt Russell, and he was given explicit orders that no one else knew about to blow this thing up, and he was going to sacrifice himself. That ends up not being the case. They used that bomb to blow up Ra, which I think is a pretty cool sequence with the way they actually kill the villain. But I don't want to say that I all of a sudden hated the movie. That's not the case. I had almost no issue with it once accepting that the second half just becomes generic action movie. So it's not that I didn't enjoy that. It's just a little bit disappointing with how interested I was in the premise to then just be like, oh, okay, so now it's just an action movie against this being. With still some cool moments and stuff.
The cool elevator death scene, I guess, where like they have like an elevator that's like, it's like a teleporter, and we were like, oh, what? I think in the reaction we were like, oh, what if like half of them got caught or something, and it happened. It's like, oh shit.
Yeah, the dude getting his head cut off by that thing was awesome.
Yeah.
And definitely the most gruesome part of the movie. This movie is PG-13, and so they didn't have like heavy language or anything, but that was the furthest of pushing the limits, I think, on that. And then the whole way they use that elevator device for the killing Ra as well, by putting the bomb in that elevator device, and then you just see his ship explode. That was a nice example of setting something up and paying it off.
Ra's like, I'm out.
So yeah, third act was fine, honestly. And then the ending of the movie, I was surprised at first how abrupt it was.
Dr. Jackson?
But I like it.
Yeah, I don't need to know what's happening back on Earth, except maybe like the old lady who was a young woman who, in 1928, I know people say we missed a subtitle or whatever, but I think it was like 1928 when they discovered the Stargate. Like, I feel like this woman dedicated her entire life to this, so I feel like her having some sort of like, hey, we made it work. I like when movies, end and they end. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't need to know their whole life story after this, but I feel like maybe just for that lady, she
Should have got something.
should have gotten something. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying?
That's fair, but it's not like detrimental to the movie.
No,
that she
no, not
did.
at all.
Yeah.
No, in fact, you almost forget about her. But because when we started talking after we finished it, when we watched it from beginning to end, I'm like, oh yeah, what about that old woman? You know what I mean? But as a button, yeah, it's fine.
James Spader does make a comment when he gives back that necklace.
Tell Catherine this brought me luck.
I will.
Is that supposed to be her thing? Like,
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
I said earlier, I think I enjoyed this movie more than you. Do you think that's fair? Did you not like the movie? What do you?
I just thought it was fine. You know what I mean? It's like something I'm never going to watch again, probably. There's nothing in there where I'm like, I gotta see this again. If people really like this movie, like, I can understand why, but it's like, I have movies that I watch, like, when I have the time or want to watch all the time. It's always, oh, I would love to watch that again. But like, this is gonna leave my memory in a month. And like, maybe when, unfortunately, someday when Kurt Russell passes and I want to watch everything he's ever done, then I might rewatch it. But
Yeah, I think for me, I'm basically on the same page as you. I would just emphasize that I did enjoy watching it for sure. Like, it's a movie that is just a typical 90s fun action movie with some sci-fi stuff. It's not even that much of a sci-fi movie, but it is because there's an alien. Like, that's really it. But it was a fun time. So while I agree that I don't really have a desire to watch this again or buy it on Blu-ray or anything like that, it was fine.
yeah. How about the 20 shows it spawned or whatever?
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So we know nothing about the series that came after this, but I do know that it spawned the extremely popular and successful Stargate SG-1, which was a Showtime show, and then eventually got moved to Sci-Fi in its later years. And I actually remember watching the Sci-Fi channel as a kid because I always watched Sci-Fi.
We could unlock the secrets of the universe.
Yeah, that was cool.
Stargate SG-1, premiering Friday, January 21st at 8. Part of the best night of sci-fi ever. Sci-Fi Friday.
But obviously I had no idea what the show was or anything. But I always thought like, oh, it's kind of interesting. Stargate, like a gate that takes you places. That's what I always thought of it. Like, I didn't know anything about it.
Yeah, I used to watch the Sci-Fi channel all the time over my grandparents' house, and I slightly remember like Stargate commercials where like, oh, Stargate tonight at 10 East PM Central or whatever.
So yeah, it was a big deal, and there was even more shows after SG-1 as well, I know. So and some other media and stuff too. So it kind of reminds me of Battlestar Galactica 1978, where more people know the Battlestar Galactica 2000s remake that it spawned. Obviously, 1978 has its fans, as we know.
Yeah.
But everyone knows, like, the reboot. It kind of feels similar where the movie has its fans, and then the series probably has its own set of fans, some that like the movie and some that don't.
Yeah.
But let's be honest, a lot of patrons voted for this movie because they want us to watch it, and we're not, so I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, and we're missing out on so many shows. Stargate Atlantis, Stargate Wakanda, Stargate January 6th.
All right, we're going to jump over to our patron takes. This is where our patrons get to say what they think of the movie, but also we ask them for their takes after they see our full uncut reaction, so they can also respond to us, tell us why we were wrong in our reaction or anything like that too. This is from Josh. I saw this movie when it came out, and it never would have occurred to me it would spin off into such a large franchise. I used to mix this movie and Soldier from 1998 up all the time because Kurt Russell's stoic military characters all blend together. I haven't seen Soldier. Have you heard about that movie?
No, I'm going to look that up, though.
I think this movie needed a director and performances with a bit more style and flair. It's overall pretty by-the-numbers 90s action movie with only the unique sci-fi concepts distinguishing it. I agree, like, almost 100%.
That's a great take. I agree with all of that, yeah. All right, this one's from David. This movie almost approaches classic status. It has the cast, the visuals, a sense of wonder, and that great David Arnold score. What holds it back just slightly is lack of character development. It could have used just a few more scenes fleshing these people out so that we care more about them, ... Perhaps the series does this, though I've only seen a couple episodes.
Yeah, I think that's another good take.
Yeah.
I think there was definitely a lot of the makings in there, especially at the beginning in the first act, where I thought there was definitely a chance I was really going to love it, and it just didn't quite all come together as a classic. But that doesn't make it a bad movie. It's just,
No. But, yeah, as quick as I got to the Stargate, maybe like 5 minutes more of character development could have done something. I mean, we literally get 30 seconds of Kurt Russell in his kid's bedroom, and that's all you need to know.
And he probably is the most fleshed out in the whole movie.
Yeah.
This one's from Tivacrid. Obviously, you guys are aware of the existence of several Stargate TV series. How do you think they move on from and expand on the lore presented in the movie? How do you think the plot develops?
My guess is the show makes no mention of the movie, and it treats the movie like its own thing, and they use, like, Stargates as the, like, not MacGuffin, but it's like, it could be used for anything. I mean, there's a show called Stargate Atlantis. I don't think this movie has anything to do with Stargate Atlantis. You know what I mean? It's like,
yeah.
There's Stargates everywhere.
Yeah, that was my guess, is that the Stargate is just to propel them into whatever the plot of the episode is. Almost like you could compare it to a bunch of different stuff, right? Like a Knight Rider or a Quantum Leap or whatever you want to put there. It's Stargate. It's the Stargate. Where are we going this episode? Kind of more of an episodic thing. Maybe it was early 2000s, so maybe some serialized stuff in there too with the characters. But yeah, I would agree because they kill Ra. So there's nothing else to really explore.
There's nothing really left to tell with this story per se. Maybe they create an overarching story, like who built all the Stargates or something. Why is there so? Who built? I don't know.
It's like Jurassic Park 2. There's a second Stargate.
You didn't know about Site B?
Well, with that out of the way, up next on Audience Cut, it's my pick. Finally. I'm I'm I am picking the 2015 film Predestination. Yes, 2015. Now, if you look up this movie, it's going to say 2014, but it's not. It released in theaters in January of 2015, and I don't care when it was at a festival in front of 30 people. It's not a 2014 film. It's not. I hate that so much. Anyway, we're watching Predestination. I saw the movie at home right after its theatrical release in 2015, and I haven't seen it since, so it's been almost a decade, and I remember the basic story, but I've always wanted to go back and revisit it, and this is my excuse to.
I don't think I have any idea what this film is, so if we're going in completely blind, for me, I'm excited.
I'm excited for you to see it too, and either you'll really love it and I'll be happy, or I can be like our audience and be disappointed when you hate it. So I'm looking forward to see how that is, but you do only need to know one thing going into it. It's 90 minutes.
Woo!